Why are we just talking about failing or succeeding when it's about the becoming?
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to How the Wise One Grows, where we share mindful conversations and meditations that help us to live with intention. Today, we get to hear from the first Arab Saudi woman to cycle the ring road in Iceland, Yasmine Idriss, and she gives us a little lesson in feminine energy and how we can work with feminine energy as we work towards our goals, as we move through the inevitable failures that happen in life, how it can support us as we allow ourselves space to rest and deal with the guilt and shame that society tries to put on us with that, and how it can support us as we embrace the becoming of life. Before I met Yasmine, she was described to me as a gentle force. And I think that powerful pairing of words so eloquently embraces her energy in the way she's moving through this life. And I cannot wait for you to soak in her wisdom. Before we dive into our conversation, I got a couple quick reminders from you. So if you haven't heard me go on about this already, one of the best ways you can support this podcast is by leaving a review on your favorite streaming platform, especially Apple Podcasts. So reviews are like gold to the algorithm podcast gods, and they help this podcast reach more people. So I'm going to share one of our most recent reviews with you all, and hopefully you will take this time to leave a review too. I listened to this podcast in the car on my way home from work. Thanks for helping me undo the frenetic energy of this long day with your calming presence. Thank you so much for listening, for leaving a review, and I hope that you feel a sense of calm every time you listen to this podcast. If you love the conversations that we have on this podcast and you want to continue exploring them and how you can live with intention, we have an amazing intentional living community on Discord created for How the Wise One Grows listeners. There is a link in the show notes to join. It's a totally free community. We set intentions every week and continue the conversations we have on the pod, and I would love to have you there. So click the link in the show notes to join. I also want to invite you to join the Dream Team, which is the coolest group of humans who support this podcast every month, and you can join for as little as $3 a month. Your contribution helps to support the operating costs that go into making this podcast possible and helps us share it with even more people. All you got to do is click the link in the show notes to join. Have I given you enough things to do yet? I think so. So let's dive into today's conversation. Before we get started, let's take a moment to land here together with 3 deep breaths. So just take a moment to notice where your body makes contact with the earth. And if it feels safe, you can gently rest your eyes or soften your gaze at a point in front of you. And drop your shoulders down the back. And take a big breath in, fill your chest, fill your belly with air. And exhale, open your mouth, let it out. Again, inhale, chest and belly expand. Exhale, let it go. One more inhale. And exhale. And you can return to that point of contact with the earth as you slowly open your eyes and return to this space. Yasmine, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to chat.
So I had the great pleasure of watching the documentary that was made about your journey. I feel so excited and grateful that I got to watch that. And I couldn't help but be like super hooked by the line that you started the video with, which was that You're the first Arab Saudi woman to bike the ring road, but that's not why you did it.
Hmm.
So I wanted to just hold space for us to lean in together. Like, why did you do it?
I did it for me, is the short answer.
Mm-hmm.
I did it because I had just come out of a 5 year phase in my life of running my own company, and
Mm.
I wanted a pause.
Mm-hmm.
And when I felt into what I wanted that pause to look like, I knew that I wanted to add some adventure
Mm.
and I wanted to push myself to my limits. And there was an intuitive sense that that's what I needed in the moment to physically push myself to my limits. Now I understand that was because that's what was required at the time for me to kind of break the walls that
Mm-hmm.
um, would allow me to be honest with myself. At that point
Mm.
in my life, I needed to physically push myself as hard as I could. And so I knew it needed to have that physical element. And when I felt into um, what that adventure would look like, I saw open spaces and I felt like just a raw landscape, open, uninhibited. And it's funny because that's such a reflection of what I was going through internally. So
Mm.
it's beautiful how I chose that for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And Iceland was certainly raw and open and uninhibited, and yeah, just nothing hiding the truth.
Yeah. I can so relate to that in terms of like, I often find that I need a physical challenge to teach me and help me like embody and integrate the life lessons that I'm working on. Like, it's one thing to kind of conceptually understand, like, oh, like I'm ready to push myself or grow in this way or learn these lessons. But it's another for like your body to physically like know
Hmm.
it on a cellular level. And I think something like a challenge like biking the ring road or signing up for a race or something like that can be a really powerful spark to help you with the internal processing of what you're working on and really help you embody it through that challenge, but more importantly, in your life.
Yeah, yeah, it's really, I don't know if it's a reflection of like where I am in my journey, but I don't think I'll always need to push myself that hard, and it can't be the only way, right? Because if you have a
Mm-hmm.
disability or you're older, whatever, it can't be the only way to do it. But just to feel in your body what you're going through in your psyche, what's wanting to come up for you is such a powerful experience, and it does not have to look like cycling the ring road.
No, it can be like tending to a garden or stepping
Yeah,
on a yoga mat or practicing breath work. You know, it can be
exactly.
so many things.
Exactly. It could be as subtle as noticing your breath, and as not subtle as biking around the world, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
And it has not a reflection of the intensity of the experience or the depth of the experience you're going to have. Um, and sometimes it is, like it was for me.
I loved so much through your journey how you talked about the role of the feminine and how approaching this like seemingly masculine energy hard task through a feminine and soft way actually made you more powerful through that. Do you mind speaking to the role the feminine played in that journey and how you found a balance between both those masculine and feminine energies to find the right strength for you through this
Yeah.
task?
Yeah, I'd love to. I went on a run this morning
Mm-hmm.
and and was listening to really soft music, and that I think all started for me in Iceland. Um, so it all happened it was all circumstantial. Um, the beginning of the trip was very intense, both the conditions of the weather, how I was feeling, and the details and the happenings around the relationship that I was in at the time,
Mm-hmm.
which all came to a head on day 4. And I asked my partner at the time to give me and the crew some space, and he left. And
Mm.
um, the trip really, really took on a different like energy from that point on. A few days
Mm.
after that, the an assistant David who was helping us with the camera equipment left as well, but that was planned.
Mm-hmm.
And so all of a sudden, it became a feminine container. It was me, Kathy, and Madison. Kathy, very good friend of mine, who was helping just with basically everything, and then Madison, the filmmaker.
Mm.
And I remember that night at dinner, we there was like this long pause where the three of us were like, "Do you feel it?" And we're like, "Yeah, do you feel it?" Okay, cool. We're all on the same page. But there was this very palpable shift in the energy,
Mm.
and I think that was the change from like being in a mixed container to like just the feminine. And the next day, I had a super easeful day on the bike, and then it's all weather dependent, but from then on something had shifted, and um, I started to find my strength in the softness. Like, I
Mm.
remember one good example is I was warned that I had like a big climb coming up, and I'd put on like a pump up song, I'd get ready, I'd like start
Mm-hmm.
breathing more heavily, like we're taking on this hill. But in that moment, for some reason, I put on an Ajit song. Do you know Ajit?
Oh, I love a Jeet.
Yes, I love
Mm-hmm.
Ajit too. It was a
Yeah.
song from her and Trevor Hall, so there was a masculine voice. But the point is, it was a very, very, very soft song,
Mm-hmm.
and I just pedaled very slowly, and it was this like easeful, graceful movement, and it felt like a wave. It felt like the slow wave, and it felt easeful. I felt like I could keep going for a long time.
Mm.
And it was a bit of a spiritual experience. I mean, I felt like I wasn't alone, like there was support around me,
Mm-hmm.
helping me climb up this hill. And I think just allowing myself in that moment to really feel the depth that's available in the intensity of these moments. The masculine is to kind of like cruise through that moment. But what
Mm-hmm.
if you took time to feel
Mm.
every second of that moment? I think there's like an extra reserve of energy that's
Mm-hmm.
available to us there. But the trick is to really allow yourself to sink in,
Mm-hmm.
because there is a middle ground where you don't get either, right? You're not getting like the intensity of the ultra masculine nor the like soft support of the feminine. Um, so I think the trick is to really allow yourself to be in it, and that carried through. There was more. I was moving. I was dancing off the bike and just moving energy in these beautiful ways. Yeah, the trip took on a very different flavor, and I think that's what it was always meant to be about.
Mm. That's so beautiful to hear. I feel like I just got back from surfing in Costa Rica, and I am a
Cool.
very beginner surfer, and I was taking a lesson, and the instructor just like kind of looked at me at one point and was like, what's the rush? Like, you don't want to be on the big waves right now. Like, where you are right now is perfect and it's a journey. And I
Mhm.
think there's that like masculine energy that comes in that's like, yes, I want to like power through and push and work hard and be on top. But sometimes when we lean too far into that, we're missing the point. And when we can
Right.
like really lean into the softness of like, It reminds me so much of yoga. In the Yoga Sutras, there's a verse from the Bhakti Sutras that's like, stop and make everything sacred. Like this moment right now, this is the divine, this is the sacred. So, how can we open up to her and embrace her in, those seemingly really difficult challenges, like biking up a hill while you're biking across a country? And even in like the small moments of like pouring yourself a cup of tea, how can we really tap into the fullness that is there in all of these
Mm-hmm.
moments? And I think you're
Mm-hmm.
really spot on by like leaning into the feminine and being
Mm-hmm.
willing to slow down and open up to feel the wide range that is
Mm-hmm.
alive in those moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, beautifully put. And I don't want to bypass the masculine either. There were definitely moments of like, we're going,
Yeah.
moments when, for example, the wind was building up and I had to get to the next like campsite or guest house or whatever, and I had to just go. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure there was a feminine approach to that, but in the moment I chose the more intense one, and
Mm-hmm.
I just went, and that's super useful as well. I think the reason we're focusing on the feminine approach is it's not talked about as much, and it's not the
Yes.
culture we live in, and it's not the option that's exemplified to us. But it's always a balance. I think it's important to note that it was just really cool to experience this ultra masculine challenge in a deeply feminine way.
Yeah, it's so beautiful.
Hmm.
And now that you are no longer like on the ring road, how are
Hmm.
you integrating this into your life? Like how has your life changed since that journey from before? And I'm also really curious too about how you lean in within yourself in moments of challenge, like when you want to call on more of the feminine and when you want to call on more of the masculine. Because you're spot on, we do need both. And a lot of it's leaning into and discerning like when you need to pull more of which end.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. It's been a while. We're coming up on a year. I did this in July of 2024,
Wow.
2023.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think, I mean, Iceland, that trip changed a lot in my life. So I
Yeah.
ended an 8-year relationship. I really felt the end of this work chapter with this company that was essentially my dream job that I created for myself and
Mm,
worked my ass off to make successful, and it just didn't pan out. So
mm-hmm.
coming face to face with the fact that this was quote unquote a failure. You know what I mean? Like we fail in life and it's
Yeah.
okay to fail in life and to just normalize that, and
Yeah.
maybe even maybe even wear it as a badge of honor.
Yeah. It's like I tried
Because
something and I
I
worked
tried
hard for
something. Like,
something. Yeah.
yeah, like I went all in and then
Mm-hmm.
some. And
Yeah.
it was all heart, and I
Mm-hmm.
don't care who knows it because I know it. And I showed
Yeah.
myself what I was capable of. Um, and it didn't pan out because it wasn't my thing. It wasn't my
Mm-hmm.
path to follow.
Mm-hmm.
Um, uh, so really being in that, and I think realizing that I don't want to jump into the next thing quickly, that I want to feel into what my vocation is, what I am here to do in this life, versus being in the stress of I need to find my next job ASAP.
Mm-hmm.
So just making space again, like this, the feminine, just creating the space to be.
Mm-hmm.
And it has been an incredible lesson to have an open week and to not like fill every day with 100 gazillion things, because let me tell you, not having a 9 to 5 job does not mean that you are free. It is very
Yeah.
easy to just overextend ourselves in so many ways outside of our work.
Mm-hmm.
um and feel, allowing myself to just be and rest, and feel into the subtler realms of this experience and see what
Mm-hmm.
wants to come from there. So it's been a continued lesson. It's been a huge lesson in permission, just permission to be, and not judge where I am in life, because it feels very right. This feels like the right place to be, and society keeps reflecting to me that I need to be productive. But let me tell you, I feel 100 times more productive doing this than than just whatever I would have done from a place of stress and anxiety.
Mm-hmm. So
Taking
it
the
sounds a
time,
lot like moving from that place of authenticity versus that space of fear.
yeah,
And it sounds also like maybe you were coming from, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is just a projection, but it sounds like maybe you were coming from a place of more masculine energy, of like
yeah,
intensity, working really hard towards this goal, this thing that you love, putting it all in. And then like the devotion to that journey of doing the ring road and saying like, I'm actually not gonna rush into the next thing, even if I'm doing something really intense. This is holding a container for myself to like find more of that feminine, and moving a little, like taking a pause, moving with that intention.
hmm. And don't get me wrong, even as I say this to you right now and speak about it, I still feel guilty
Oh
for
yeah.
not, like, you know what I mean? For not like
Mm-hmm.
being productive in this way. And
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? There's a lot of guilt and a little bit of shame in being honest about where I am in this moment.
Yeah.
Um, and I have this deep belief that one day I will be very thankful for
Yeah.
having taken this time. Because I don't want to, right? We don't want to like just be in the nothingness, right? No one
Yeah.
wants to just, everyone wants to feel useful and that they're
Mm-hmm.
contributing. But how much better of a world would we have if everyone's contributing from their hearts versus from, somewhere else?
Yeah. I very much relate to what you're saying in that too. Like,
Mm.
I feel as if I'm coming from a similar place of where like I had started my own business, put it all into that, and then I got to a point, I thought it was like my dream job that I was
Mhm.
creating, and pandemic hit and the world changed and I changed, and I was like, man, maybe this isn't it anymore.
Mhm.
And starting this podcast has been a big moment of like leaning into what feels really right now, and feeling a lot of those mixed emotions of like shame, feeling like a failure, feeling confused.
Mhm.
And I think about that reminder too in this space of like the beginnings and the unknown, and not feeling like the quote unquote success you want to be or think you should be in your mind. And I've been reflecting a lot on what that surf instructor said too, of like, why do you want to be riding the big waves now? Like, where you are right now is a part of it.
Right.
That's like the process. And just being humbled of like, we're in the beginnings and in the learning of the journey, and it's just unfolding, and how can I enjoy this moment too as I'm moving
Right.
through it.
Right. And what we see in the media is the success or even sometimes the failure. We talk about the failure sometimes, but mostly we're talking about success and we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at people's success stories. But what about the interim? What about the
Mm-hmm.
pause? What about the middle? What about the building? Like,
Yeah.
what are you doing to become the person you need to become to bring your dream to life?
Yeah.
We don't talk about that enough because most of us are in that phase for most of the time,
Yeah.
right? And so, why are we just talking about failing or succeeding when it's about the becoming?
Mm. as, as you say this really beautiful thing, my headphone drops, but you're so right. Like, no, but you're so spot on. Like, it's not just about failing or succeeding. Like, life is the
Mhm.
becoming, and how can we lean
Mhm.
into that? And especially when we're in, like, we're on Instagram and we're seeing these highlight reels of everyone's life and all these stories, we really are denied the full scope of what it takes to get there. We just think everyone's in all these high
Yeah.
moments, but what you don't know is like how much work or how much doubt or all the other things that got to that tiny moment, or maybe what's underneath the surface that just isn't even spoken or seen of that moment too.
Yeah. And I think that for a lot of people, the interim phase is done in community. I mean, ideally it's all done in community, but we support each other, right? By sharing the fact that it feels pretty icky to talk about the fact that I'm not working right now,
Mm-hmm.
might give permission for someone else to feel okay about their situation. Like I feel like voicing these things, especially in this new like gig economy where a lot of people are like going in and out of jobs relatively quickly or taking
Mm-hmm.
time to figure out their next step. There's a lot more pauses where the generation before us was in the same job for 30 years,
Mm-hmm.
so for us, normalizing the pauses and celebrating them and encouraging each other to fully and giving each other permission to fully be in them,
Mm-hmm.
um, I think really helps.
What are you finding is supporting you in giving yourself that space to figure out what is next, and like what keeps you rooted in those moments of doubt and when the shame comes in and all the self-criticism or social things that try to flood our minds?
Mm-hmm.
What's helping you and supporting you, and what isn't too, like it's
Mm-hmm.
very real if it doesn't feel that way, it doesn't feel grounding too.
Yeah, great question. I wish I had answers.
Mhm.
The truth is I'm figuring it out. And
Yeah.
what's helping me, and it has been a relatively busy time. Like I'm traveling quite a bit. There's a lot of movement,
Yeah.
but for a while there was less so. And learning to be in what I'm feeling very much as a void, learning to be in the void of like total nothingness. Like you feel into it. Like I'm someone who's pretty fiery, who's usually like I'm working towards something and I'm motivated and
Mhm.
I'm that's my nature. And
Mhm.
to allow myself to be in the water for a minute and be like, okay, there is nothing here. What does this mean?
Mhm.
Maybe I don't need to know what it means. Maybe I just need to be.
Yeah.
Um,
And the discomfort of that too, if that's not your inclination or your
so
nature. Yeah.
so uncomfortable. But again, the feminine or the masculine, or like we can also find other archetypes other than feminine, masculine, because people usually tend to think about gender. We're not talking about
No.
gender here. We're talking
Yeah.
about archetypal energy of like yin and yang,
Mhm.
um, doing and being. And it's insanely difficult for me to just be. Like I took a nap the other day after like a movement practice. I felt tired and I'm like, oh, maybe I should actually like rest. And I
Mhm.
napped, and that was such a foreign feeling.
Mhm.
There was like a wrongness in it for me.
Yeah.
And so just being with that, noticing what are my tendencies, what are my patterns, why do I feel the way I feel when I give myself rest? Why is it so hard to give myself rest?
Mhm.
Um, why do I feel the need to be productive in subtle ways? Like, oh, I'm going to get creative. This is my creative. But what if you don't want to pick up a paintbrush?
Mhm.
Like even in the pause and the rest and the vacation, there is a certain script for how to do it. I feel that goes around on social media and in society of like, this is how you take a pause in life. You become creative. But it's like, no, to become creativity is your highest expression.
Yes.
Like to be creative, you have to be pretty, you don't have to be anything. You can create from any level, but your most authentic work will come from a place of truth. And to be truthful and honest, you have to give yourself space and time to feel the truth. And
Mhm.
so that's what I've been doing. I mean, I have a practice of stillness in the mornings, and I'm also in study right now. I'm studying, but what's helped me has really been um, being in the pauses, like consciously being in the pauses. and
Yeah.
following the discomfort in my body wherever I feel it. And it usually leads me somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I very much relate to that, like a natural fiery energy of like, go, go, go. I need to be working hard. I need to like prove my worth. I need to achieve this goal. Like, that is my comfort zone. I'm like, yeah, I can hang out in that place all day. Like,
Hmm.
I can do that. And then burnout happens. I really felt that like during the pandemic. I just kind of hit this wall of like, like I don't want to do things from that same energy. And honestly, like if people go back and listen to the very first episode of this podcast, like the intention of why this was started was to how can I work towards something in a soft way. And I found myself getting to a point of almost like I really softened. I leaned into that discomfort. I still get uncomfortable in the softening, but I almost found myself leaning too far into the yin and getting a little static. And now I'm trying to find in the balance of bringing back in that yang, or like more of that masculine, and finding a balance again. But I think that I so desperately needed the pausing and the slowness to like recover, recalibrate. So now that I can like move this energy in a more balanced way. But I just think it's important to note that like it is always evolving and changing, and sometimes you'll need more of the yang, which is more of that go 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 energy. Sometimes you'll need more of the yin, which is more of the moving slow and rest. Sometimes you'll need more of both, and just learning how to honor what you need from moment to moment, and that deep listening within yourself, and meeting it without judgment, meeting it with compassion, and like having the courage to meet your needs, even if it's different from what someone says it should be or what your mind thinks it should be. Like having that strength within you to really just meet your needs from moment to moment, and know that it's going to change, and that the way we show up, like showing up with 100%, is going to look different every day. Some days it's going to be like going on a run and checking off your to-do list, and some days it's going to be 100% is laying on the couch and taking a nap and not talking to anyone, and both are okay.
Yeah, I love it. And also, our natural tendency, like our being, will push us towards the opposite side. When we've had enough rest, we will feel it, and
Mm-hmm.
we will, like, our bodies are made to move and be energized and be vital. We are. There's a lot of life force in human beings, and so like there's this idea that, oh, maybe I'll get lazy. It's like, no, the
Mm-hmm.
moment your cup is filled, you will feel a fire to start doing something.
Yeah.
And so there's this misconception, I feel sometimes, of like the feminine is lazy, or rest is not allowed because of these reasons. But it's like, oh, don't you worry, you will
Yeah.
feel very energetic once you've given yourself proper rest.
I like to remind myself of that concept through the work of Dr. Kristen Neff a lot. She does a ton of research on the science of self compassion, and there are like MRIs that show the part of your like brain that deals with like motivation and willpower gets smaller when you focus on self-criticism, which typically we think like if I'm hard on myself, then I'm going to work harder, I'm going to achieve my goals. But when you meet yourself with compassion and really focus on cultivating compassion, the part of your brain that deals with motivation increases. So like meeting
Mhm.
yourself with that feminine, that compassion, is actually going to increase your willpower and your capacity to meet those goals and really stick with it through the long haul, and achieve that thing, which is a really
So
cool
cool.
thing. Yeah.
Hmm.
In the documentary, you talked a bit about like the significance of doing something for the first time, and how that can sort of like be a paradox. Do you mind speaking to like what it means to be a Saudi Arab woman doing these things for the first time, and the wholeness that comes with that?
Hmm. Yeah, that's a topic that I had to sit with for a while because I felt uncomfortable with it a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think the just purely the attention of being the first to do something, um, and then I realized I needed to step up to what this was and like really own that I was the first to do this and that this was a big deal and it could influence others in a certain way, in a positive way. But the way I felt was I wasn't really that I felt that I was standing on so many other women's shoulders that it was misleading to think of this as like a first or a, there are many very impressive Arab and Saudi women who have paved the way for me and others to do what we're doing today. Today, Saudi is a very is a place that really empowers women
Mm.
in a big way. I feel like for all the years that it wasn't doing that, all of a sudden, um, it changed the script 180
Mm.
almost. Like women are now the faces of all these big movements and brands and political um, movements. So what it means for me to be the first Arab and Saudi woman to cycle the ring road is simply opening the door for others if that's available to them. If what I did could inspire others um to discover their threshold and their boundaries and test the waters around that, then great. um it was important for me not to get lost in the ideal of what that could be,
Mm.
and to start getting lost in that and having that be the reason why I pushed and why I did. Because when you're cycling every day and you're faced with these intense winds, you have to have a why. You have to be
Yeah.
like, why am I what's the reason for pushing today, for going, for it is nonstop. And it was 3 weeks of like nonstop challenge. I think I had 2 days of like okay wins that were manageable, and for that why to have been um, I'm doing this to be the first Arab and Saudi woman to cycle the ring road, it would have been powerful, but I didn't want that to be it for me. It was
Mm-hmm.
important that this was for me first, and then for anyone else second. And I want it was yeah, it was just powerful for me to own that and be like, most people do things for selfish reasons, and it's not,
Mm-hmm.
and those are the most powerful challenges and expeditions because there's truth in that. And like how beautiful to do something for you first and for that to influence others and and inspire others.
Yeah, that's really beautiful because then it's coming from a place of more living in authenticity for you. And
Hmm.
whatever that looks like and however that embodies, that is what can carry you through versus like the ego of what you think you should be doing or the impact you think you should be making. It sounds like it's a much more intentional, authentic way of carrying yourself through a challenge, but really like every action of your life.
Hmm. Hmm.
You said before that like the script has sort of flipped in Saudi. Do you mind like do you know kind of when that started happening or like what sparked that flip or how you started to notice that in your life?
Yeah, it was not subtle.
Yeah. I
It
don't know
went.
much to be
Yes,
perfectly
yes.
honest.
No,
So,
I will. I'll
yeah.
fill you in a little bit.
Yeah.
So Saudi was a relatively conservative country about 5 years ago now. It was a society where women had there were certain rules where we had to cover ourselves a certain way. Women did not have the right to drive a car. We needed permission from men to do a lot of things, and then almost overnight that shifted.
Hmm.
And women had the right. It started with the right to drive, which was truly groundbreaking. I mean, I remember the feeling in my body when I heard that news.
Wow.
Um, and and then
How old were
everything
you when
else,
that happened?
everything trickled down from there. I mean, 25,
Okay.
I think, 25,
Yeah.
26. Yeah. Um, and yeah, they just started empowering women. We still, you still have to dress conservatively, but the abaya, the black cloth or dress that we used to wear to cover ourselves, now doesn't have to be black. Is more it's optional, unspoken rule that it's optional, but you still have to be dressed conservatively. But now the kaftans are colorful, and there's um yeah, just more joy in the way that women carry themselves. And there's a huge social effect that came from that. And the government's really pushing women to be on the forefront of things. So it's never been a better time to be a woman in Saudi Arabia in particular. Um, and yeah, I guess the timing of it was also really, really cool. Had I done this before these changes were made, I think it still would have been impactful, but in a different way.
There's so much challenge that's
Hmm.
happening in the world, and
Hmm.
sometimes it feels like you're just like going up against a brick wall and that it might never change, but hearing something like that is just a really beautiful reminder that like it can. And change takes a lot of time, and sometimes it just takes one big thing to spark that after a
Hmm.
long hard work. So it's really
Hmm.
cool to hear that impact and how
Hmm.
that's impacted you and so many women.
Yeah. And I think a key thing to note there is throughout those years, I never felt disempowered. Maybe it was because of the age that I was there.
Mhm.
So I left for boarding school at 15. So I left relatively young. But growing up in Saudi was amazing. It was for kids. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Um, but did I think, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this or that? No, I didn't. And that was, I think, the result of like my upbringing at home. I have three older brothers, and I was raised like them. I had the
Mhm.
same standards, expectations, and liberties. And that takes me back to thinking, okay, what if those changes weren't made? What if Saudi was
Mhm.
still the same country? What would you do? Or while you're waiting for the change that you want to see in the world, how can you be with yourself as it's happening, as you're in
Mm.
the interim period? And for me, I think it's just feeling in your body, taking time to create the feeling that you want to eventually feel,
Mm.
right? Whether that's through like a movement practice or through meditation or through visualization or a walk in nature, but like really like being present with yourself and creating that energy of expansion in your body. Um, I feel like that is a beautiful tool to have while you're waiting for your dream to come true.
That is so beautiful. Thank you so much for that. I think that's so spot on, is like really empowering ourselves within ourselves of like,
Hmm.
there are so many circumstances and things in the world that are very real, and
Hmm.
you have capacity and agency within you to, generate that feeling and cultivate those changes within yourself, even if the things around you haven't evolved that rate yet.
Yeah, I think we're more powerful than we think we are.
So, as you are just in this liminal space of like finding out what's next and really like reflecting on the journey that you had, is there anything that you would recommend to someone if maybe they are kind of in that point of a turning where they're shifting course and they're unclear of what comes next? Is there anything that you would share with someone?
Mm. I would say, to the best of your ability, get resourced. And one thing I didn't
Mm,
mention that's been a bedrock for me has been my community, my people, um, and the people that support me as well. So to resource yourself and um, to to not feel like it's all or nothing. Like it doesn't look the same for everyone. It's not I'm going to quit my job and that's the only way that I can give myself space to feel into my highest desires. No, you can
mm-hmm.
it's, you can I get that people are tired after work. You can give yourself the weekends. You can give yourself a morning on Saturday or Sunday. There's so many creative ways of finding and carving out this time for ourselves, um, to be with our deepest, most essential selves. So not to be hard on ourselves, and yeah, just finding ways to encourage finding ease in the process, because even in that whole process there could be a very intense way of approaching it, of like, I must find the time, I must soften. It's like
Mm-hmm.
it becomes a oxymoron very, very quickly.
Yeah.
But yeah, finding people to help you along the way, like it's not one sided. It's usually we help the people that help us and vice versa. But to be in conversation and to have someone to keep you accountable, um, don't love that word, but to keep you, to make sure you're honoring your commitments to yourself, I think is
Mm.
helpful.
Yeah, I think that's a really beautiful reminder of like rest can look soft too. It can
Hmm.
happen by taking 3 breaths before you walk into your home at the end of the day. And we can find these small moments and ways to integrate that.
Hmm.
Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, everything doesn't have to be as intense, just like you said. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. And again, that,
Hmm.
that reminder to meet yourself where you're at.
Hmm.
Mm.
Hmm.
Thank you so much for sharing this journey and for being so vulnerable and authentic about like how we can live in the rawness of what it means to be human, how we can be soft and compassionate with ourselves through it, and really the wholeness of all that it embodies. I really appreciate hearing your story, and
Yeah.
I know so many people listening will too.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's a part of my own journey to share about the vulnerability and rawness of this place. And so thanks for offering this platform and for talking about things that are important right now. Yeah.
I'll make sure I have Yasmine's information linked in the show notes too, so you can stay connected and see all the wonderful things she's doing.
Mm.
Your film is not currently available for the public, but maybe will be.
Yeah, TBD
TBD.
on
Cool.
that.
So,
Yes, I'll let you know.
yeah, as I know, once it's available or if it's available, I'll put it in the show notes for people
Hmm.
too. But thank
Hmm.
you all for listening and being with us. And Yasmine, thank you so much for your time. I really loved this conversation with you.
Such a pleasure. Thanks for having me.